Hey guys, what's going on? It's me, Jay. Here to do the second part of um the year new 1999. So where we left off last time with regards to 1999 was Stone Cold Steve Austin regaining the WWE Championship from The Rock. The Rock is now corporate champion. He defeated, we talked about in the last video, Mankind in 1998 Survivor Series, and he is, hey Lisa, what's going on? He is the sole representative, the corporate champion, if you will, of Vince McMahon's corporation, which is the main faction and pretty much has been well, since the beginning of 1999. Vince McMahon became the Royal Rumble winner, but of course, he forfeited his championship opportunity in order to give it to somebody else who is more worthy. That somebody else, he wanted it to be, I think, a default champion, but Shawn Michaels, who is newly turned babyface, came in, reversed the decision, and it was thought to be Stone Cold Steve Austin. Vince McMahon challenged it. They went at war with each other for the first time ever in a match at St. Valentine's Day Massacre that February, which resulted in the Big Show um, coming to the WWE after being in WCW for 4 years since 1995, and now is firmly with the corporation. Initially, I remember I said they didn't know what to call him. He was Big Nasty and other weird nicknames, and finally they settled on The Big Show because the initials to The Big Show were TBS, the rival company's primary TV station. And since he came from WCW, I guess that made sense. He came from under the ring during Vince McMahon and Stone Cold Steve Austin's cage match, but still, Stone Cold Steve Austin won, winning the number one contendership to go against The Rock at WrestleMania 15. They had WrestleMania 15 in Philly. Some of the features of it was of course, Austin Rock Part 1, in which Austin regained the championship for the second time. Um, they had a WrestleMania pre-show party featuring Isaac Hayes, who had a hit that year on the charts with My Sweaty Chocolate Balls, and Big Pun performed. Terror Squad had just released their first album that year, so it made sense for Pun to perform. And the year before, in 1998, he had his biggest hit with Don't Want to Be a Player No More / Still Not a Player. The remix with Joe. Everybody remembers it. Boricua, More Than I. It was one of the biggest hits of the summer of 1998. So it made sense that he performed at the WrestleMania Rage Party. The biggest, coolest thing was like Shane McMahon, Shane McMahon, been a rap fan, a hip hop fan forever. And he was rocking out to Big Pun and Terror Squad at the WrestleMania Rage Party. I think they were singing "Your Man Can't Do It" off Fat Joe's album, which also came out in 1998, the year prior. So, and another big thing, and Bruce Pritchard talked about this on his podcast when he talked about WrestleMania 15. Another big thing, how Pun was so big he couldn't even walk up the stairs. Of course, it wouldn't be long we lose Big Pun in the following year in 2000. But Pun was there, you know. He even mentions it on his album. He says, I was Philly blended in WrestleMania. In other words, WrestleMania was in Philly. So they have the show. It features the first Hell in a Cell match at WrestleMania and the third in history, with the Big Boss Man taking on the Undertaker. Famously, the Big Boss Man was hung by a noose, and it was considered one of the worst Hell in a Cell matches in history. There only been 3, but compared to what we saw at King of the Ring 1998 and what we saw at Bad Blood 97, The bar was set pretty high, and Boss Man did not exceed it. After that, the Brood, which was newly formed in late 1998, came out, and it would lead to them joining the Ministry of Darkness, which is why I put this thumbnail of The Undertaker, because this is the greatest heel work of The Undertaker. The Undertaker had been a babyface since 1992. We talked about his babyface turn when he turned on Jake the Snake Roberts, and they had their match at WrestleMania 8. Jake Roberts was going to hit Elizabeth with a chair, and Undertaker stopped him. That led to Taker versus Jake in 1992 at WrestleMania 8. But now, after years and years of being a babyface, The Undertaker finally turns heel again. At Judgment Day in 1998, Paul Bearer turned on his son, the fruit of his loins, Kane. Paul Bearer had brought Kane to the WWE, and in Bad Blood 97, Kane made his debut. After months and months of Paul Bearer telling The Undertaker that Kane is coming, The Undertaker not believing it, and Paul Bearer and The Undertaker getting back together begrudgingly after The Undertaker wins the WWF Championship again in 1997 at WrestleMania 13. We talked about it in the 97 review video. Um, Finally, The Undertaker loses it, and Paul Bearer is again a heel, and Paul Bearer finally reveals that The Undertaker is that Kane is alive. And then later on, they have the first Inferno match. We talked about it in 1998. Then later on, Paul Bearer reveals that he is Kane's father. That The Undertaker's father was not Kane's real father, and that while he was a mortician at The Undertaker's parents' funeral home, it's funny because he's talking about it with Jerry the King Lawler, and they're talking backstage, and it's like he's not revealing, they're acting like the camera's not there, and he's talking about the time and he was a young apprentice under The Undertaker's father, that he had sex with The Undertaker's mother and produced Kane. So it is revealed that Kane is his son, but then later on at Judgment Day of that year of 1998, he turns on Kane and he reunites with The Undertaker, and The Undertaker is now taking on a darker persona. This is the Ministry Undertaker. And he started recruiting several people. Mabel, who was the 1995 King of the Ring, returns to the WWE, this time not with Sermo, not part of Man on a Mission. He was initially there to be a backup to Vince McMahon, as Vince McMahon was stacking the deck against Stone Cold Steve Austin at the Royal Rumble. But The Undertaker abducts him and puts him in his faction. The Undertaker abducts Mideon and puts Mideon in his faction. Mideon, of course, the former Phineas Godwin. So The Undertaker is on a mission to collect these souls. Likewise, in late 1998, Farouk, who was no longer part of the Nation of Domination, and after the Nation of Domination, he just dwindles and basically does nothing, tries to fight off The Rock and the rest of the Nation of Domination for the latter half of 1998. But then he, he's wrestling a match, and Justin Hawk Bradshaw, who was Blackjack Bradshaw, but Barry Windham is no longer in the company, so the Blackjacks have broken up, and besides, Barry Windham throughout 1998 was a member of the NWA faction. So he kind of drifts off. And then the Jackal, who was a part of the Truth Commission, which was South African apartheid era heels, and it was supposed to be a launching pad for Kurgan, the giant Kurgan, who went nowhere and then later turned babyface as part of the group The Oddities, along with the returning John Tenta as Golga, and the giant Silva, like this big Brazilian giant. Luna even turned babyface. and the Oddities. I mean, the Insane Clown Posse did this song, and that's when the Insane Clown Posse premiered in the WWE. By this time, the Insane Clown Posse has left the WWE, and they're now in the WCW with Raven. 1999, but we said we're not covering WCW in 1999, and we're not. So, but anyway, that faction disbanded. So Jackal basically is with nobody. So he then forms the tag team of Farouk and Bradshaw, initially known as the Acolytes. But in late 1998, he leaves the World Wrestling Federation and he would go to uh, he would he would he would later go to ECW as part of the network. They were doing this whole storyline where the network, because ECW finally got a TV deal in 1999, a good one, a national syndication TV deal with the Nashville network. But the network wanted to censor them, so they decided to turn it into a storyline where the former Jackal now becomes the network representative as a heel to try and clean up ECW. It was really weird. But anyway, as far as the WWF, he left the WWF, so that leaves the Acolytes, Farouk and Bradshaw, with nobody to represent them. So they eventually join the Ministry of Darkness as well. So this Ministry of Darkness is becoming quite a formidable force as we head into Backlash, which will feature the rematch of Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock. And as predicted, initially, Shane McMahon wants to take away Stone Cold Steve Austin's title belt, his Smoking Skull belt. Vince McMahon is against it because what's been happening with The Undertaker too is that he's been doing weird stuff, especially to Vince McMahon. He's been stalking Vince McMahon's home. He left his symbol on the lawn of Vince McMahon, and he had in his possession a teddy bear, and the teddy bear was Stephanie McMahon's teddy bear. We didn't know Stephanie McMahon, but he's mysteriously talking about he's going to abduct a mysterious woman. He abducts Stone Cold Steve Austin and tries to embalm him. He causes him a match against The Rock. But anyway, long story short, The Rock fails to capture the World Wrestling Federation Championship from Stone Cold Steve Austin, and this would eventually lead The Rock to be turned on, be betrayed by the corporation, and eventually, finally, lead to The Rock's babyface turn. Rock, in the middle of 1999, finally turns babyface. But as we head into April, a lot of things are changing for the WWE. The WWE is immensely popular. 1998 was a hell of a year for the WWE. Ed Ferrara and Vince Russo, the backstage writers of the WWE, are on fire. So, just like what happened with WCW when they had a hell of a year in 1997, is now happening with the WWE. They want to expand their market and they want to compete with WCW on Thursdays as well as Mondays. So they want to create a Thursday show. Now, Vince Russo says in 1997, when they created Thunder, when WCW created Thunder, that the writers of the WWF laughed at WCW because they said, well, they're just going to burn themselves out, right? They're going to, burn their creative team out. And their creative team was, of course, Kevin Sullivan, who was behind WCW's boom, right? But now WWF wants to do the exact same thing. And this will, of course, increase Vince Russo's payload in 99. They have a deal with UPN to produce a pilot episode in April of SmackDown. Basically, the show was patterned on The Rock's catchphrase, which was "Lay it to smack it down." So he went around saying that SmackDown was the Rock show. And true to form, the first SmackDown does feature The Rock in the main event. Just like Thunder, the first episode of Thunder featured a tag match with the Macho Man and Sting going against Hulk Hogan and Kevin Nash in 1998. In 1999, the first SmackDown, WWE's Thursday show, the pilot episode of SmackDown, not the first episode, but the pilot episode of SmackDown that many people do not remember was the main event was Triple H. Like I said, he was newly turned heel at WrestleMania, reunited with China. Triple H against Triple H and The Undertaker against Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock. Now that Shane McMahon has figured out that The Rock is no longer the corporate champion and no longer the sole representative of the corporation anymore, now he's aligned himself with The Undertaker to go against his dad because he thinks that his dad is weak and ineffective. So essentially, what is happening is Vince McMahon is turning into a babyface. Vince McMahon actually comes to the aid of Stone Cold Steve Austin because Vince McMahon and Stone Cold Steve Austin are now reluctant allies because The Undertaker is promising a black wedding with Stephanie McMahon. And we all remember this scene. He has Stephanie McMahon in the back of his truck, right? Because Vince is telling Ken Shamrock to break The Undertaker's leg. Break The Undertaker's leg. Break The Undertaker's leg. Right? And we all remember The Undertaker turns around and goes, "Where to, Stephanie?" And we see Stephanie McMahon scream. This is the first time that we see Stephanie McMahon. So, and then he The Undertaker, takes Stephanie McMahon and sacrifices her on his symbol, puts her up to this elaborate like wedding to like the devil. The Undertaker now is a cultic. He's the devil. They're basically doing a spooky style gimmick in the way that the Dungeon of Doom did it. Did it 4 years earlier, but they're doing it way better, and they're doing it, with more edge. Stone Cold Steve Austin comes out to save Stephanie McMahon, and this leads to a reluctant allegiance of Vince McMahon and Stone Cold Steve Austin. And for the first time, Vince McMahon, as a wrestler, is a babyface. So in the preceding months, the sinister Undertaker is talking about a higher power. The higher power is the one directing his actions. The higher power we're going to meet the higher power. We're going to meet the higher power. So we're all like, we're on the edge of our seat because this storyline is hella good, right? And we're like, well, who's it going to okay. Who's it gonna be? Who's it gonna be? And I thought was gonna be either Ted DiBiase or Jake the Snake Roberts, because both Ted DiBiase and Jake the Snake Roberts have some connection to the Undertaker. Remember, we talked about when we did the 1990 video, we talked about Ted DiBiase bringing the Undertaker to the WWF as his mystery partner in the Survivor Series. We talked about 1994 after the Undertaker's match with Yokozuna at the Royal Rumble, and then months later, leading into that year's SummerSlam, he brings the fake Undertaker, Brian Lee, to the WWF as his protege, the Undertaker, which leads to the Undertaker versus Undertaker match at SummerSlam 1994. So we talked about all this with Ted DiBiase. Then Jake the Snake Roberts. He's mysterious, right? He's spooky. You can see him doing it. And he's done a Christian storyline in WWE in 1996. So maybe I was thinking this could be him. Apparently, WWE had in their minds that this would be Christopher Daniels. Now, Christopher Daniels' nickname was the Fallen Angel, right? But in 19, at least for me, I can't speak for anybody else, but in 1999, okay, I didn't know anything about Christopher. I didn't know who he was. I didn't become aware and acquainted with Christopher Daniels until 19, until like 2000 and the early 2000s when he was in TNA, when he was doing the Curry Man and Shark Boy gimmick, right? So if it were Christopher Daniels, it wouldn't have affected me. But what they come up with is even worse than fucking Christopher Daniels. What they come up with is the higher power is Vince McMahon. I mean, Vince McMahon is the higher power. And we all remember the line as the hooded guy comes out, Vince in a hood, and Vince goes, pulls it off. It was me, Austin. It was me all along, Austin. And then you hear Jim Ross in the background as the announcer. Son of a bitch! It was me, Austin. It was me all along, Austin. I had a kid that was born in my building that year. His name was Austin, and I used to always tease him with that. It was me, Austin. It was me all along, Austin. But basically, what this is indicating is that Vince McMahon basically had his own daughter abducted by the Undertaker in storyline. So they were going to sacrifice Stone Cold Steve Austin. They were on the symbol. They were going to sacrifice Stephanie McMahon on the Undertaker symbol. They were taunting Vince McMahon, all for what? Just to sucker Austin in? Like, it made absolutely no sense. It was a swerve for swerve's sake. And it just, was stupid and dumb. But anyway, we head into, okay, where are we now? With the No Mercy pay-per-view. No Mercy was okay. In the U.S., they started doing UK only pay-per-views, as we know, in late 1997, and they did No Mercy UK pay-per-view in which Stone Cold Steve Austin defeated Triple H and The Undertaker. Triple H is climbing up the ranks, as it were, in 1999. But the next pay-per-view for the United States is Over the Edge. Now, as we talk about this was emotional for me. This year in 1999, this event in 1999 for me will never be forgotten. Because this event was when the WWF got really, really fucking real, guys. This was the night, and I know Lisa's been watching because she doesn't watch my wrestling videos, but this was the night, guys, that Owen Hart died. For the first time ever in my years of watching wrestling, which was 9 years now. 9 years. I've just started watching in 1990, and I was 15. I was 8. You know, I was like 5 years old, and I'm now 15. That was almost 14 going on 15. So that was 9 years, almost 10, that I've been watching professional wrestling. And one of my favorite, and I talked about this, one of my favorite wrestlers growing up as a kid was Owen Hart. When I first started school in 1993, the school that I would have attended for 10 years, Henry Viscardi School. I started in 1993. And remember I said I used to come to school with wrestling belts and everything. I was the biggest fan. Go back and look at the 1994 video, which makes sense here. I was the biggest fan in 1994. And who was on top in 1990? And I called myself the Rocket, right? That was my nickname, the Rocket, because of Owen Hart, because of Owen the Rocket Hart. I loved Owen Hart, guys. I identified with Owen Hart. I identified with his struggle as a little brother. I identified with him because I felt like he was unjustly done by Bret Hart. All Bret Hart had to do was tag him at the Royal Rumble in 1994, and they could have won the tag belts with the Quebecers. And throughout Owen's career, I sided with him over and over and over again. I loved it when he won the King of the Ring in 1994. The ruse that he and Jim the Anvil Neidhart pulled off, I said, was one of the most brilliant things ever. I mean, I literally followed this guy when he was in the Nation of Domination, when he was in the Hart Foundation, when he was in the Owen Hart 316. I just broke your neck. Even though I like Stone Cold, I thought it was funny when they were feuding in Survivor Series 97 after SummerSlam 97. And SummerSlam 97, which also involved Owen Hart, was one of the times when wrestling got really real too, right? A lot of things that happen real in wrestling happen to the Hart brothers or with the Hart brothers or having to do with the Harts in some way. Even Chris Benoit, which would be 12 years following this, he has a connection to Owen Hart because he not only trained in the Hart, he was one of the last students of the Hart Dungeon, just as Brian Pillman was too, who passed away 2 years before this at Bad Blood, right before the pay-per-view, right? We talked about it. But he also, on Nitro that night, wrestled a hell of a tribute match with Bret the Hitman Hart after this incident happened. So even with him, like another time when wrestling got really real, and another time when wrestling got really real, Survivor Series 97. So a lot of times when wrestling got really real in the 90s and in the 2000s, it involved the Harts or somebody adjacent to the Harts, right? But on this night, Owen Hart died in the ring. Like Kemper Arena, St. Louis, Missouri, I wasn't watching. I'll admit I was not watching because, again, as a kid, and I was still a kid then, I was still 14 years old. I was still 14 years old. So I'm still like under my grandmother's roof. I still have to abide by her rules, and she only allowed me to order a certain amount of pay-per-views a year, and I never wasted money on what I considered to be in your houses because I came up at a time before 1995, before in your houses existed. Even when I cover these, No Mercy 90, I get 99, I guess not 99. No Mercy 2000 probably be the exception. But I really don't talk about these intermediate pay-per-views. What I mainly discuss is WrestleMania, SummerSlam, Royal Rumble, and Survivor Series, and King of the Ring. Because that's what I consider to be the big four, the big five. In your houses, I never really watched. I wasn't watching this night. But the next morning when I heard about it, I was mortified because what they were doing with Owen Hart was disgusting. Owen Hart, the Nation of Domination had faded out, right? He was no longer in the Nation of Domination. It had faded out. Triple H, turned heel. DX was kind of no more, so their main adversary, which was the Nation of Domination, faded out too when The Rock became the corporate champion. So Owen Hart's role in that as the Black Heart faded out too. So he started the team with Jeff Jarrett, who was no longer with Tennessee Lee and now was reunited in the WWF with Deborah, which I know seems kind of weird considering that when he came to back to the WWF 2 years before this, one of the first persons he dissed was his former manager in WCW, Deborah. But Deborah now had made her way to the WWF. She was no longer with Steve Michael in WCW. She was no, and she would take on a raunchier character in the WWF because the WWF was more raunchy than WCW, right? So Jeff Jarrett is now with her. He has a buzz cut now because you remember he lost his hair at SummerSlam 1998 in a match with X-Pac. So he and Owen Hart are tag team partners now. They even become tag team champions, right, later on. And Owen Hart, of course, going for the IC championship. Because Owen Hart, to me, was one of the greatest IC champions there ever was. So but they decide they want him to do Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara. They want him to do a raunchy storyline in where he has sex with Deborah, right? He has an affair with Deborah. And of course, Owen Hart is married, a married man of many years to his wife, Martha. And he's not up for this because he comes from a wrestling family. He comes from the quintessential wrestling family. I consider it even more so than the Von Erichs because, I mean, hell, Stu Hart trained Fritz Von Erich, right? So he's not up for doing shit like this. Even Brett, that's one of the main reasons why Brett left um, the WWF because they started to head in this attitude era direction, and Brett really wasn't for it. Owen couldn't leave, of course, because he was trapped in his contract, as we talked about before, in 1998. But he still didn't want to do this shit. So he didn't want to do the storyline, so they wanted to punish him. And one of the ways they wanted to punish him was by making fun of his moral stance. Like he didn't want to do it, so they're gonna make fun of him. They're going to lampoon him. Like Sting at this time, 1990. Well, not really in 1999, but in 1997. Throughout 1997, Sting had descended from the rafters to beat up the NWO. That was his thing, right? We talked about it. So they wanted to make fun of that. You know what I mean? They wanted to mock that. And they wanted to make Owen Hart this moral, like, high and mighty, moralistic character, kind of like what they would do to Kurt Angle once Kurt Angle would really join the roster, right, in 2000. Kurt Angle does have a feud with Tiger Ali Singh in 1999, a short one. You know, he's starting to wrestle dark matches, but when Kurt Angle would come, they would do the exact same thing to him. The same thing that they championed in the 80s with Say Your Prayers and Take Your Vitamins with Hulk Hogan. They were now lampooning in their own, not just the image of the squeaky clean baby faces in WCW like Sting, but the images that they had themselves created with the likes of Hulk Hogan. Like Owen Hart would tell people to drink their milk, right, and get good grades and stuff as the Blue Blazer. They brought back that character from 10 years earlier. The Blue Blazer, which never really got over anyway. I mean, he had like one WrestleMania match against Kurt Hennig at WrestleMania 5. Like, it never really got over anyway. So, like, bringing it back, even during that time in the 80s, it never got over. So imagine 1999. like, it wasn't going to really get over then. So, but they wanted to do it, and they wanted to, like, make him a bumbling idiot. And like a lot of people won't remember this, but like they did this thing with like they brought back Coco Beware, his tag team partner from High Energy in the early 90s, as like a different kind of Blue Blazer. You know what I mean? Like they were kind of doing like the Yellow Dog thing that they did with Brian Pillman in 93, or they did with Dusty in the 70s, or they did with Stagger Lee with the Junkyard Dog in 82, but people, or they would later do with Hulk Hogan that when he came back in 2003, where people would say, "Oh, Owen Hart's the Blue Blazer," and Owen Hart would say, "What do you mean I'm the Blue Blazer? I'm not the Blue Blazer." And then another guy would be the Blue Blazer. But the joke was that, well, Coco wears black, so like, how can you mistake him and Owen Hart for the same thing? And they also, like I said, wanted to make Owen Hart this bumbling idiot. Like he would do the zip line thing, and he did it a couple times on Raw, but he would fall, right? Where he would like trip over the zip wire and shit. So that's what they have him do in this match against the Godfather for the Intercontinental Championship at Over the Edge 1999. Well, Owen Hart's harness was loose, and because he was too big for this small ass harness, and he comes pummeling down. Because the harness was supposed to be a quick release, because they were like, oh well, they don't want him to unhook the harness, because Sting, like, he always unhooked the harness like before he got into the ring, but Sting's thing was different. Sting wasn't in an actual match; he was just an ambush attacks with the NWO. But they wanted, Owen Hart to quick release, right? And he was supposed to have Max Mini, one of the smaller wrestlers, as his mini boob laser, riding with him on his back. Thankfully, Owen Hart said that he didn't want to do that, and it's kind of saved Max Mini's life. But Owen Hart, the harness released too fast, and he falls to his death. And as he's going down, people are like, "Oh," he's like, "Watch out!" Right? And he falls. And throughout the night, there's already the pre-show in Sunday Night Heat featured Vince McMahon getting attacked, right, before the event, because Vince McMahon was supposed to be the special guest, one of the special guest referees for the Undertaker Stone Cold match. So he gets attacked prematurely. So there's already an ambulance on set for this fake injury of Vince McMahon. But now they have to be called to attention for a real injury, and that is to Owen Hart. Now, people still talk about this to this day because people are like, well, Vince should have stopped the pay-per-view, right? Like, what he does is Owen Hart dies, and he's laying there in the middle of the ring. Pardon me, guys. It wasn't St. Louis, Missouri. It was Kansas City, Missouri. It was still Missouri, but it was Kansas City. I get confused. St. Louis was Brian Pillman. But anyway, it was Kemper Arena in Kansas City, Missouri. And like Owen Hart falls, he falls to his death, right? And then rather than stop the pay-per-view right then and there, they roll his dead body out, his injured body. They don't know if he's dead yet, but his injured body out, and they continue the pay-per-view. And like you can see, they do the interview with Jeff Jarrett and Deborah, who work closely with him, and you can see them breaking down. Like nobody was in the right mental state to compete. And add to this, what they're doing is a satanic gimmick with the Undertaker, where he says, "I will destroy the souls of all your heroes." So basically, Owen Hart, and then later on, they have to say this is not a stunt. this is real. And you see Jerry the King Lawler and Jim Ross just breaking up, saying, Owen Hart has died. Owen Hart has tragically died. So on live TV, Owen Hart dies, and Vince McMahon continues the pay-per-view as the owner of the World Wrestling Federation. It was just one of the most disgusting things that you could ever imagine, the way they conducted themselves. And the result of it is Stone Cold Steve Austin loses the WWE Championship to The Undertaker. And I just felt so bad for Jeff Jarrett and Deborah because, like, they had to Jeff Jarrett wrestled Val Venus that night, and they had to go out there and perform where their friend just died. All the guys, really. You know what I mean? It was disgusting, and it really shed a bad light on the WWF going forward. And despite the fact that Owen Hart had only wrestled in WCW for a brief while in 1991, because his brother was there, they still paid tribute to him. So, that was good of them. Like I said, the tribute match with Chris Benoit uh, and Brett, an incredible match, which they would face each other later on in the year at Mayhem as well too. So now the Undertaker is champion. It won't be long till Stone Cold Steve Austin regains the championship later on a Raw, which is like the highest rated Raw in like history for a segment for a match. The Rock, This Is Your Life later scores higher than that, but I'm talking about for a match, Stone Cold Steve Austin versus The Undertaker. They finally, in 1999, The Undertaker and Stone Cold Steve Austin finally got into their groove because for a while, guys, uh, they really struggled. We recall in 1998 SummerSlam. They didn't have their groove. It was a match, but it sucked. So we're in June now. We had the King of the Ring. Basically, this King of the Ring features a handicap match. Vince McMahon and Shane taking on I'm taking on Stone Cold Steve Austin, which they defeat Stone Cold Steve Austin. And the winner of King of the Ring, the surprise winner of King of the Ring, is Billy Gunn. Now, they were trying to push Billy Gunn as a mega star, but later on, The Rock cuts a scathing promo on Billy Gunn, where he pretends to be God, talking to Billy Gunn, basically saying that Billy Gunn is a loser. So that leaves Billy Gunn, the winner of the 1999 King of the Ring, dead in the water. The Undertaker defeats The Rock, also at this event. We head into Fully Loaded. Where The Undertaker and Stone Cold Steve Austin once again face each other in a first blood match. And the stipulation here is that if Stone Cold Steve Austin lost, he would never be able to again challenge for the WWF Championship. And if he won, Vince McMahon would no longer be allowed to appear on television, which Stone Cold Steve Austin wins the event. So now we're headed to SummerSlam in August. And SummerSlam in August has a unique twist to it. The twist is the return of Jesse the Body Ventura. Jesse the Body Ventura returning to the WWE after being gone from it for 8 years and suing Vince McMahon. But he's now the governor of Minnesota. He became the governor in 1998, the year prior. And it's all over the news. So Vince stops at nothing to get him there. and it's a convoluted main event that features China as a number one contender for a while. She challenges Triple H, and then she loses to Mankind. Mankind loses to this one and that one. It gets really weird. By 1999, it gets really hard to keep up with because Vince Russo was doing all this kind of switches and swerves and switches. Like, it's just crazy. But inevitably, we end up with Mankind, Triple H, and Stone Cold Steve Austin in a triple threat match. And Stone Cold Steve Austin loses it to Mankind. He doesn't want to. He doesn't want. Uh, this is the event where, like, they're on Sunday Night Heat, they're on MTV, they're getting a lot of mainstream exposure, and they have this sit down interview in the preview show for this with Triple H, and Triple H is just sitting down. Triple H is sitting there, and he's like, "I am the game. I'm a student of the game." That's where he gets the nickname, the game, and that's when they start calling him it. But he's getting a lot of traction, but Stone Cold Steve Austin doesn't feel like he wants to drop the belt directly to Triple H. So what he does is he drops it to Mankind, and Mankind gets defeated by Triple H the following night on Monday Night Raw. So by the end of this, the following going into the next week, by the end of SummerSlam 1999, Mankind is once again the champion. Speaking of returns, with Jesse the Body Ventura as the referee, because now it's like we're going back to 1988, where Jesse the Body Ventura was the referee for the first SummerSlam. He's now the referee once again for this. And congratulations to Mankind as he's the new WWF champion. But again, he loses. Like I said, he loses the night after the Triple H. Triple H is now a huge megastar. Now he's the WWF champion, and his first title defense features multiple opponents, and one of those opponents is Owen Hart's former tag team partner, the British Bulldog, who has now returned to the WWF, which puts him on the outs with the family. As you guys recall, he was in WCW after Brett got screwed. He and Jim Neidhart walked out as part of the Hart Foundation, and he was in a match with the Dancing Fools, Alex Wright and Disco Inferno, and he got back body dropped in the trap door that was set for the Ultimate Warrior at that year's Fall Brawl, and he got injured. So Martha Hart and the rest of the Harts, Brett and all them, they're upset at Vince for multiple reasons. Brett, I think, is more upset by the screw job than his brother's death. I don't know. But, like, understandably so. After all Vince McMahon has done to the family, they're upset with Vince. So they don't want to see Davey go back, but Davey's broke, so he needs to go back. And basically, this is the era where he showed up in jeans. He looked terrible. It was a six-pack challenge match in Unforgiven 1999, and it featured the Big Show, British Bulldog, Kane, and The Rock. This was the one where The Rock bottomed him on dog shit, right? But this was September. Backtracking to August. August 26th, my birthday. This was my 15th birthday. I turned 15 this year. And this day, August 26, 1999, and SmackDown, the pilot is a success, a smashing success. It gets picked up by the stations, by UPN, and they have their first SmackDown, a Iron Man match between The Rock and Triple H, with Shawn Michaels as the referee. And Shawn Michaels super kicks The Rock, cheats, and helps Triple H, his former DX tag team partner. And we think, oh, this is going to lead to something with The Rock and Shawn Michaels. It doesn't. The Rock and Shawn Michaels never worked together. But that's the first SmackDown, basically the first official SmackDown. And it's still on the air today, But that puts a strain on Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara. Now Vince McMahon wants Vince Russo to work more hours. So he tells him, hire an au pair. He's like, I don't even see my kids. He's like, hire a nanny, hire an au pair, right? And he's like, what do you mean, Vince? Like, you're not giving me time off. So similar to Ricky Steamboat, we talked about in 1988. It's the same with Vince Russo here. You know, it's like you're working me too many hours, Vince. Are you kidding me? So he then goes to WCW, which has just fired Eric Bischoff, and he says that he will work for WCW. So he convinces the people at Ted Turner's organization that he's the one responsible for the success that Vince McMahon has had, in the past, almost a year now. So they're like, oh, well, yeah, we want him on board, get rid of Eric Bischoff and hire him. So Ed Ferrara and Vince Russo come to WCW, and their first event is in October of 1999, Halloween Havoc 1999. And we talked about the weird occurrence there where Hulk Hogan comes out and lays down for Sting. Like they try to do this work shoot thing, and we're like, uh, uh, Buff Bagwell's the chosen one, but then Jeff Jarrett jumps over because what happened with Jeff Jarrett was now they want to make China a singles wrestler. She's no longer with Triple H, right? They split their team up because of what happened after SummerSlam. See, because they started to want to involve Stephanie McMahon in more storylines, where Stephanie McMahon becomes attracted to Test, and then Test and Shane McMahon have a match where for the right to date Stephanie McMahon, and then Stephanie McMahon and Test are going to have a wedding, and then Triple H drugs Stephanie McMahon, and he gets married to Stephanie McMahon in a Las Vegas drive-through, and now begrudgingly DX and a reunited DX and a heel Triple H kidnap Stephanie McMahon. So now Stephanie McMahon and Triple H are working together on camera, so that leaves China to do other things. So China, Chris Jericho has jumped ship. Chris Jericho's debut in 1999 was one of the best things ever. There was this whole big thing in 1999 about the following year, Y2K, the year 2000. So he becomes Y2J, and then The Rock is out there cutting a promo, and then all of a sudden Jericho's music hit. Jericho had been over in WCW in 1998, but they wouldn't give him a chance. They wouldn't give him an opportunity because there was a glass ceiling in WCW. If you weren't already an established star, you could never become an established star. Remember, we talked about that with Eddie Guerrero. We talked about that in regards to Rey Mysterio. Later, Booker T, as he left Harlem Heat in his Best of 7 series with Chris Benoit. So it was the same with Jericho. So just like with the Big Show, Jericho decides to jump ship. And who can ever forget it, man, when he first comes in, and then The Rock mentions when he took off Juventud Guerrero's mask, he's like, and The Rock's like, who in the blue hell are you? It doesn't matter who you are. And Jericho's now in WWE. So eventually he starts to work with China for the Intercontinental Championship. But the first man that China is picked to work with is Jeff Jarrett. Now, Jeff Jarrett was climbing up the ladder of success when he first came in '97, but Stone Cold Steve Austin refused to work with him, right? Because when he cut that initial promo in '97, he made fun of Austin's gimmick. He called Austin vulgar, right? Because that's when he was coming in as a moralist, the person to return tradition as part of the NWA faction, right? In '97, which would later go into '98. So as Jarrett's doing this gimmick where he's smashing guitars off people's heads now with a buzz cut after SummerSlam of '98, we think, okay, maybe he'll get a shot with Austin, but he doesn't. Austin doesn't want to work with him, so now they stuck him with China in a good housekeeping match, basically a no-holds-barred match for the Intercontinental Championship. Now he doesn't want to work this, you know what I mean? So once again, just like '95, he's threatening to walk out of the WWF because he doesn't want to work with somebody. Back then, he didn't. Him and the Road Dogg were unhappy with their payoff there, and they just had him lose to Shawn Michaels of the Intercontinental Championship, and he did that, and then he walked out of the company. He returned in '96 of Royal Rumble 96 to work with Ahmed Johnson, but Road Dogg did not return until much, much later in 96, right, as the real Double J character. But now he's doing the same thing. So Vince, he basically pulls what he did with the Ultimate Warrior. He decides to give Jarrett this pay increase for his time, and China becomes the first female to become the Intercontinental Champion ever in history. But Jeff Jarrett, as Vince Russo's leaving, Jeff Jarrett is also leaving with Vince Russo to go to WCW, and they're going to push him in the coming year. And in the year 2000, WCW is going to push him, Jeff Jarrett, to the moon, guys. They're going to push him to the moon. They're going to make him the franchise of the new revamped WCW that Vince Russo is planning to put together, that doesn't include the likes of Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan and Lex Luger and all these other guys. Like Kevin Sullivan, he's pushing Benoit, he's pushing Bret Hart. But he wanted to initially make Bret Hart the centerpiece, but as we will see in Starrcade 1999, I'll bring it up briefly, Bret Hart gets injured in the match against Goldberg, and he suffers this concussion. So even though they wanted to make Bret Hart the centerpiece, as they form yet again another reunited NWO with Bret Hart as the leader and Jeff Jarrett in the faction, is the whole culmination of this powers that be storyline. Like basically we knew it was Vince Russo and Ferrara, but they would sit behind a desk and they wouldn't be seen, sort of like George Steinbrenner in Seinfeld. You know what I mean? Like they would just be talking and they would be the powers that be. So the culmination of this powers that be storyline in 1999 was yet another reformation of the NWO, the silver and black NWO, which wouldn't last long. It formed at the end of 1999, and it was supposed to feud with Bill Goldberg, but Bill Goldberg broke his hand, and that didn't go over well, and it would quickly disband. Like it wouldn't last long because of Bret Hart's injury. It wouldn't last long at all. But it was supposed to be with Bret Hart as the centerpiece, and Jeff Jarrett was like the second guy in command. And Jeff Jarrett would have the United States Championship, and Bret Hart would have the WCW Championship, and it just went nowhere. 97 was the culmination of the NWO. Every time they tried to bring it back after that, in 98, in 99, and later in 2002 in the WWE version, it always was snake bit with bad luck. They always had bad luck when it came to reuniting the NWO. But they tried again in 99 with Russo's version, and it went nowhere, like I said. They made Kevin Nash the commissioner of WCW for a while. But anyway, going back to the WWE, that's where we're at by September. And they decide to bring No Mercy in as a U.S. pay-per-view, ending with Triple H being defeating Stone Cold Steve Austin for the WWE Championship. And the new Brood, basically the Brood had disbanded and now included their rivals, the Hardy Boys. The Hardy Boys actually went through this whole phase in 99 where they dressed in Jinko jeans, baggy jeans, and they had Michael Hayes come out as himself as their manager. Like it was some funny shit. Like finally Michael Hayes ditched the whole Doc Hendricks thing, what he'd been doing since 1995 when they brought him into the WWF, because they never wanted Michael Hayes. Like they never wanted Freebird Michael Hayes because of the thing that they had done in 85, where the Freebirds got drunk and Andre the Giant snitched them out and they got fired quickly. They were supposed to come in 85 as baby faces, right, as their initial run in WWF. But They didn't. And then when he left WCW in '94, he being Michael Hayes, they brought him in a year later to WWE, and it sucked. Doc Hendricks, like he was supposed to be the '60s throwback, hence the name Hendricks, Jimi Hendrix, right? But it sucked. So finally, they brought him as the Hardy Boys manager. The Hardys have been in WWE for a couple of years, like since '95 as jobbers. But finally, they were getting their big break, feuding with the Brood, and they actually joined the Brood later on. Finally, at the Survivor Series, we have a triple threat match in which the Big Show, what a year it's been for the Big Show. He started off the year in WCW, gets kicked out of the NWO and kicked out of WCW after the match with Kevin Nash. And he ends the year being the WWE champion, defeating Triple H and The Rock in a triple threat match at the Survivor Series. And then we get to Armageddon. Armageddon is the big reveal. Vince McMahon as a babyface. He's a babyface again now. Storyline Ministry of Darkness disbanded. He now is feuding with Triple H, who has his daughter was abducted like twice in 1 year. Like 999 features some weird shit because it's like circular. Like I said with the Big Show, this was basically the best year he would have in his WWE career. 1999, his debut, and by the end of the year being the WWF champion. But they're not really focused on that necessarily. They're focused more on Triple H. Triple H has abducted Stephanie McMahon. He's married her against her will, right? He drugged her basically and drove her into this drive-thru where she got hitched with him. Now, her father is a babyface again after he was a babyface in the beginning of the year, turned heel, the higher power, and then turned babyface again. He's a babyface going up against Triple H in this no-holds-barred match at Armageddon. And what does this feature? Stephanie McMahon turning on him. Now, she's willingly participating with Triple H. She's willingly his wife. She's willingly his on-camera companion. He reforms DX as the heel DX. And we now close the show with the McMahon-Helmsley era, close 1999 with the McMahon-Helmsley era in full effect. We'll see what goes into this later on at WrestleMania 2000, aka WrestleMania 16, as Stephanie McMahon, as this becomes a history-making WrestleMania, because this becomes the first WrestleMania where a heel walks out of WrestleMania as the champion. And that's Triple H. Triple H becomes the first heel to ever walk out of WrestleMania as a winner. Ever. Like, they wouldn't let Yokozuna walk out of WrestleMania in 1993 as a heel champion, but they let Triple H walk out of WrestleMania in Anaheim, California in the year 2000 as a heel champion. It is a fatal will be at WrestleMania the following year, will be a fatal four-way match. The Rock will win, disputingly, the Royal Rumble. Him and the Big Show will be like the two finalists, and they don't know which one went over. So The Rock is counted as the actual winner of the match, but he's not counted. He has to go into a fatal four-way match with a McMahon in each corner, like an actual fatal four-way with a McMahon in each corner. You have Vince McMahon will bring out The Rock. Shane McMahon will have the Big Show, and he'll be united with the Big Show. Linda McMahon will bring back Mick Foley wrestling for the first time as himself under that name, Mick Foley, because he'll be retired in the Hell in a Cell match at the Royal Rumble against Triple H as Cactus Jack, a hell of a triple threat, hell of a Hell in a Cell match, Royal Rumble 2000. Between them, right? and and he'll come back months later as Mick Foley wrestling in the main event at WrestleMania 2000. And then you'll have, of course, Stephanie McMahon in Triple H's corner. This is a unique WrestleMania because Undertaker won't be there. Undertaker will undergo in 2000 a transformation that will affect his career after a Buried Alive match with Vince McMahon. He will come back later on and reemerge as the American Badass. Now, there was talks that he was possibly going to WCW. That's why, according to Kevin Nash, he was going to WCW. That's why he switched gimmicks. That doesn't happen, but he does come back as the American Badass. And for the early part of the 2000s, he will be the American Badass. I talked famously up until 2004 for 4 years. I talked famously about how I didn't like the American Badass. I thought it was weird that the Undertaker they were humanizing the Undertaker. A lot of people did, apparently, because when they came back in the Boneyard match at WrestleMania 36, the match against AJ Styles, people loved it. People were like, oh shit, the American Badass. People are nostalgic for it. But I was a 90s kid. I'm nostalgic for more than what the Undertaker was. And to me, the Ministry Undertaker was the best version of the Undertaker. I love this version. I never liked the American Badass, but it's whatever. It was a cool theme song. Kid Rock, American Badass theme song, and then Rolling by Limp Bizkit. The new metal was the rage in 1990, in the late 90s and early 2000s. Even My Way becomes the official theme song for WrestleMania 17. We're not there yet. That's 2001. That is going to be epic, 2001, because it's the biggest height that WWE would reach. This year, 1999, not only do they lose their two writers that many people feel responsible for the success of WWE, but WWE becomes so big this year in 1999 that it goes public. It goes from a privately traded company, which it had always been since Vince McMahon Sr. established the company in 1952, to a publicly traded company, the first wrestling company ever to be traded on the stock market. They have the big ring set up in Wall Street. WWE is doing big things in 1999, huge things in 1999, and the fiscal year of 2000, the following year, will be their most successful fiscal year in their history. So look forward to that coming up. I'll do the same thing that I did with this. I'm sorry it's a brief skim through. I wish I could have hit every point, guys, of 1999, but I just couldn't. I have a dentist appointment tomorrow and all that. So I wish I could have, man. I wish we could have talked so much more about 1999, but we couldn't, guys. But 1999 was a huge year for the company, man. A huge, huge year. They returned to network television. I mean, yes, it was UPN, but it was still network television for the first time in 11 years. Since 19, well, since 19, well, no, not the first time in 11 years, sorry. The first time in 7 years, because Saturday Night's Main Event ended in 1992 with the British Bulldog and Shawn Michaels. So, for the Intercontinental Championship, and finally returning to network television this year. And I remember the hype around it, man. It was sort of like something else that happened this year in 1999. It was sort of like when Star Wars returned. Like, my generation had not been old enough to see Star Wars in theaters. Like, it was the last Star Wars was 1983. I wasn't even born. Similarly with Saturday Night's Main Event, the hype that surrounded the initial Saturday Night's Main Event special Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant match in 1988. I hadn't been I had been alive for that, but I was only 4 years old and I wasn't watching professional wrestling. So I don't remember the hype, but I remember the hype around SmackDown, man. My matron, Fran, her sons were just getting into wrestling. My friend Eugene would have me do these imitations, we call them the voices, of these wrestlers, and we would do them every single day on the school bus. And we were so excited, man. We were so excited. Our matron's son was just getting into wrestling at that time, and she was, telling us that he was excited to see SmackDown because he didn't have cable. They were excited to see SmackDown. And thank God that SmackDown all those years remained on UPN because later in the 2000s, I would lose cable as well. My family would be unable to afford cable because we went through a lot of economic hardships in the 2000s, for various reasons that are not important and not germane to this video, but the topic. And during the years of like Eddie Guerrero, Rey Mysterio, 2005-06, I couldn't really watch cable wrestling, couldn't really watch Monday Night Raw during the peak years of the brand extension, which will come later, which we'll talk about in the last year that we do cover this series. We will talk about the brand extension, but I was able to follow SmackDown during the height of the SmackDown 6 era in the 2000s, and I was not able to follow Raw. Apparently, I wasn't missing much because it was Triple H's reign of terror. But this is where it all started, man. This is where it all started for SmackDown. This is where it started for Triple H to be a single star. He becomes the Game in 1999. So we end the year with The Big Show as the WWE champion. And we end the 90s. The 90s was definitely an era for WWE, and we chronicled the entire era. We started with the Ultimate Warrior and we ended with the Big Show. We chronicled the ups and downs. Lisa just sent me an email of the Ring Boys that are suing Vince McMahon for molestation. We talked about the Ring Boy scandal in 1992, in 1993 when we did those perspective years. It was a year of a decade of incredible highs and a decade of incredible lows for both the country and the world of professional wrestling. We saw the first impeachment of a president since the 1800s, since when they impeached Andrew Johnson in the 1800s of Bill Clinton, and it was mentioned on a wrestling program. Recall we talked about it in 1998 when they were doing the impeachment of Bill Clinton because of the Monica Lewinsky scandal, because of perjury. We didn't talk about it, but because I don't think I don't know if I mentioned it in the WCW 1998 video, but Eric Bischoff and Hulk Hogan were in a mock feud. With Jay Leno, which will culminate in the Road Wild match in 1998, a tag match, where Jay Leno would team with DDP and Hulk Hogan would team with Eric Bischoff. And during the monologue and the mock show that they had that made fun of the Tonight Show, Eric Bischoff made a joke about oral sex regarding Bill Clinton. But this was what the talk of the town was in 1998, 1999, as Bill Clinton tried to what they call wag the dog. He tried to invade Sudan. Well, he didn't try. He did invade Sudan in retaliation for the embassy bombings of Kenya and Tanzania by Al-Qaeda to take attention away from his Lewinsky scandal, which WWE and WCW made fun of. Shawn Michaels, we recall, in late 1997, saying, late 1997, early 1998, I did not sleep with that young intern. In fact, I was up all night. It was a huge moral panic on the part of the Republicans to get Bill Clinton impeached. It ultimately failed. He was not impeached. He was impeached, but he wasn't thrown out. But 1999, different story, man. Al Qaeda will strike again, attacking the USS Cole this year. And it was a big year for movies. I know this is completely off topic, but it's just talking about 1999 in general. It's outside of wrestling because we covered everything wrestling. But outside of wrestling in general, 1999 was a huge year for movies. The Phantom Menace came out again. Star Wars reignited for the first time, and it was initially huge, man. That summer, they had the commemorable. I don't know if you guys remember the commemorable Pepsi cans with each new Star Wars Episode One character on them. Guido, we're not Guido, Watto, right? Anakin's owner. Anakin, Jake Lloyd as Anakin. And American Pie came out that year, which was like American Pie was like a movie that defined that generation. To this day, ask any walk up to any millennial and be besides the suck it thing with DX, walk up to any millennial and be like, this one time at band camp, and I guarantee you, as soon as you say, and this one time, people will finish the saying, and this one time. And this one time at band camp, yeah, she says, Allison Hennigan, she says, and this one time at band camp, I stuck a flute in my pussy. And it just, every millennial knows how that phrase finishes. American Pie was an awesome, awesome movie. And like I said, 1999, The Matrix came out that year. Just a few things as far as wrestling related that I didn't cover in other years that I wanted to cover. I completely skipped over the Ultimate Warrior's second exit from the WWE in 1992. I talked about his real life problems with Vince McMahon with the steroids and everything, but I didn't talk about how they exited the character. I did in 96, Camp Coordinator beat him up. But in 1992, Papa Shango, who was now the Godfather in 1999, Papa Shango, Charles Wright, cast a voodoo spell on the Ultimate Warrior that had him throwing up black goo. Like the Ultimate Warrior was weird in 92. People didn't even think that was him. They thought it was Kerry Von Erich. But and in 94, I said I was going to backtrack and talk about Tatanka, but I didn't. Tatanka turned on Lex Luger. They did this whole storyline. This is SummerSlam 1994. They did this whole storyline where Tatanka was saying that Lex Luger sold out. You sold out, Lex, and he would like burst into Luger's dressing room, and he would see Luger talking with Nikolai Volkov, who was in the Million Corporation at that time, and he'd be like, "See, I said it. You sold out, Lex. You sold out." And I'm thinking, yeah, Lex Luger probably did sell out. And I'm having this bet with my stepfather at the time, right? And like, yeah, Lex Luger probably did sell out. Nope. Tatanka sold out, and that pretty much tanked Tatanka's career. That was an ill-fated heel turn that he did. But that's just two of the things I wanted to backtrack and finally talk about, because I'm like, it was irking me that I didn't talk about some of the most important storylines in 1992/1994, respectively. But anyway, guys, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We're heading towards the end. We'll pretty much have it covered. 2001. Wrestling changes forever and the world changes forever. Wrestling changes forever in 2001 because in March, the ECW closes down forever and WCW closes down forever. Within weeks of each other, like both companies close down, and WWE ceases to have competition for the first time ever in its history. And of course, the world changes forever because on September the 11th, 2001, two planes struck the Twin Towers. Al Qaeda finally. We started this series in 1993 when the first World Trade Center bombing happened, and we'll be ending it when the second World Trade Center bombing happened. I mean, how apropos. And in 1996, we did talk about I mean, 1990, yes, five, I think it was. I mentioned that the Monday Night Wars, the first ever head-to-head battle between WWE and WCW, took place on September the 11th, 1995. And basically, September the 11th, 2001, the world changed forever. And WWE was the first event, the first live event held after 9/11, like a week later after 9/11. It was the WWE SmackDown. And we'll talk about it when we get to 2001. In 2001, the fortunes of WWE would change forever because no longer having competition, they would eventually decline in ratings. And what they would do at WrestleMania X7 with Stone Cold Steve Austin and Vince McMahon, they formed their first alliance in 1999, and they will form a second alliance in 2001, this time with Austin turning heel, would irrevocably change the fortunes of the company. They haven't really been able to recover from until like the latter half of 2010. But as we leave the latter half of the 2010s, not 2010, which was one of the worst years ever, we won't be talking about that in this series because we're not going that far deep. But we're going to 2001, only a little bit of 2002, like Hulk Hogan's return and shit, the NWO. But we're not going deep into like 2008, 9, whatever. You know what I mean? But 2010, just take it from me, is one of their worst years ever. I'm talking about the latter half of the decade when they started to gain traction. Basically, when Triple H took, well, not even the latter half of the 2010s, the early 2020s, like when Triple H took over booking for Vince after Vince left for the first time in 2022. That's when ratings really started to pick up. So, but it all started here. It all started this year. This year, 1999, Triple H becomes the star. He hooks up with Stephanie McMahon in 1999 on TV, kayfabe, and then before you know it, he's hooking up with Stephanie McMahon in the back too, and they get married, and then he becomes the boss's son-in-law, and he becomes the heir apparent instead of Shane McMahon. So big things are happening as far as 1999. The world is changing, guys. What the two, both for WWE, professional wrestling in general, in the world, as far as geopolitics is concerned, what the things that would define professional wrestling in the world, basically in the 2000s, are shaping up this year. Peace, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell button to see my next videos coming out. Love you.